All right, let's pray and finish this up here, and then we'll do a little review together. Thank you, Father, for a fun time to relax, chill a little bit. Thank you for this time of semester with all the memories that come flooding back and anticipation of Christmas break. And I just ask that the Spirit of God would prepare each one of us to be the blessing, encouragement, lighthouse that you want us to be around family and friends. And just bless our final regular class here, and then the exam tomorrow, and just ask that Christ would be on. In Jesus' name. It is tomorrow, right? Wednesday. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, at the same hour, 10 o'clock. So, all right. Yeah, just a few things about Helen Roosevelt that I think are worth talking about. Okay, you can actually go online and find interviews with her that have taken place. Just type in Helen Roosevelt on YouTube, and you'll find some interviews. A couple of them are kind of cheesy. The interviewer is it's old school kind of interviewing, and guy's a little awkward, but what she has to say is really good. One thing I forgot to check this. Can somebody look and see if she's still living? I think she passed away.
I think I heard that.
Yeah, I think she did. Just don't remember what year. So maybe you could check that out. She was born in 1925, so she would be 75, 95.
She died in 2016.
Okay, she'd have been 98 if she was still alive. Yeah. It's amazing that she lived as long as she did in light of what happened. So let me just run through this. She was sent away at age 12 to a girls' school in England and studied medicine at Cambridge. Quite an intelligent person, well equipped. And she left the Anglican Church to become an evangelical. So God got a hold of her heart. And remember, the Anglican Church is kind of divided. There are some that are more gospel true than others are. She joined WEC. Remember, WEC is Worldwide Evangelization Crusade. We saw that before. And she went to serve in the Congo. Okay, and so what happened in the Congo is one of the most it's one of the saddest and yet one of the most encouraging stories of anybody we've studied. She was really good at making evangelism first and medicine second. And that's, I mean, if you think about it, no matter what you do in this life, gospel ministry is always going to be our most important motive. I have 4 children, only one's in vocational ministry, the other 3 are doing other things, but they all recognize that being lighthouses for Christ, representing Christ, is number one. She had a burden for a training center for nationals in the Congo to learn the Bible and medicine. So she was a woman of vision. Very, even in her 80s, when you read these interviews, she's still got a lot of pep, still very energetic. And as you might expect, if you have a single lady who has a lot of energy and ideas and things, she met some resistance especially from the male leadership among the missionaries. Some feeling like she's trying to, be a leader beyond the bounds of her womanhood, if you will. So, and she actually gets relocated to a leprosy camp. She did not like that idea. I mean, think about it. A leprosy camp. Pretty amazing. And so she decides to establish another training school. So she doesn't give up. She's going to use this opportunity to do that. And she gets another reaction from a male leader. Just real quick. It says WEC missionaries were scheduled for furloughs every 7 years, but due to ill health, she returned home in 1958 after only 5 years in the field. She was disillusioned with missionary work, and according to one biographer, feeling that it was unlikely she would ever return to the Congo. But she became convinced that her real problem was her singleness. Yeah, let me just skip to that, okay? Yeah, there's a quote here about, yeah, this part about her, the reaction of a male leader. She has this little quote, I'll read part of it here. She writes, in her terms, he's just taken over the work, her place, which she built up out of nothing, out of her dreams, out of her heart, out of her money she'd raised. This was the place where she had dug the water holes, cleared the ditches, fired the bricks. She had acknowledged the facts that you could not have two people in charge, that he was a man, and that in Africa, a man was the superior being, so she handed over the keys. She found she couldn't take it. She perhaps had been her own boss too long, but now she had lost everything. She had always taken morning prayers. He took them now. She had always taken the Bible class. Dr. Harris took it now. Dr. Harris organized the nurses, and Helen had always done that. Everything that had been hers was now his. But one of the things I admire about her is that she dealt with that by recognizing that ultimately it's the Lord's work, and she was just willing to serve where God wanted her. It's really easy in ministry, I mean, not just in ministry, but in whatever work you're doing, to take ownership. And there's a right sense in taking ownership. In other words, taking responsibility for what you're doing. The downside of taking ownership is when you feel like this is mine and nobody else has a right to run this. That's what she, and not just Helen, but other women along the way who had, good ideas, were not able to follow through. But she doubted ever returning to the Congo, and she finally decided, okay, my real problem is I'm single. So she got a hairdo, she got some new clothes. She figured she was going to spiff herself up so she could attract a husband. And what happened? Work. So once again, now she has, two strikes against her, so to speak. One, all the men on the field, they took over everything that I started. So I don't own anything there now. It's all theirs. So I come back here and I want to find a husband, and that falls through. And so, she's really having to deal with it. And what God is doing is he's molding and shaping her for something even more challenging that's coming up. I mean, you think that leadership problems are bad? You think singleness is bad? Neither of these compared to what she was about to face. And God was using these experiences to really draw her to himself and prepare her for the ultimate test. She actually resigned from the mission. She resigned and then resigned to God's plan for her when she saw this wasn't working out. Whoops, I'm sorry, go back. And if God allows negative things to happen to us, it's always because he is conditioning us for something, an even greater opportunity later on. It's just the way God works. He's always taking us forward in our walk. Did you get that, Matthew? Mm-hmm. Okay. So she goes back to the Congo the year I was born, 1960. And there's the rumblings of war, tribal conflict going on there. A lot of missionaries were leaving, and she decided to stay. And so Helen determined to stick it out. In fact, this third point is really humorous. The men felt pressured to stay, not to be outdone by a woman. So, you wonder about their motives, okay? So some of the men and their wives and families said, no, we're staying because if Helen can stay as a woman, then we can stay too. So, you get a bit of pride mixed in there. And Civil War broke out 4 years after she arrived back. 1964, the Simba Rebellion, okay? 5 months of captivity, she was raped, her teeth were knocked out, several of her teeth were knocked out, she was beaten. I mean, really, by human standards, she should have died. And that was all a way for the Simba tribe to humiliate the white man who had dominated them, for so long. And so again, to them, it didn't matter what nationality you were white. That's all that mattered. And so she, I don't know how many times she was raped, but she was just brutally abused. Of all the missionaries we've studied who have faced physical persecution, she's probably one of the most severe cases. Now, and she finally ends up, there is a rescue team that comes in eventually, and I think she thought she was gonna die. I mean, she tells you that. She was sure she was done. But God allowed her to live. Remember, this is back in the 60s. And if you listen to one of her interviews, these interviews are like in the 1980s or 90s, maybe even 2000s, I don't remember exactly. And here she is, she lives to a ripe old age. She ends up going back 2 years later to a different Africa. Things have settled down, and just the fact that she would go back is amazing. How many people would go back after something like that had happened, But she did. She ended up going back. All right, I want to stop there with her. Don Richardson's a good story. He wrote Peace Child. He believed, he created something called redemption analogies. He always looked for something in the culture. I'll just put his picture up here. He was always looking for something in the culture that he could use as a bridge, as an analogy to bring the gospel story in. And so if anybody read Peace Child before, I would encourage you to do that if you have an opportunity. All right, sorry to rush through it, but I do want to get some time for the review here. And if you want the notes on Don Richardson, I can give them to you. In fact, I think they're already on. I think I have them on Canvas there. But let me pull up some practice things for you. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Dr. Mark, I need to go blow my nose.
Yeah, go ahead. That's not what I want. All right. So let me change this so she can get the right image for her. Claire, I'm trying to get the right shot here for you to see. Let's see. There we go. All right. Now you can see your class members, most of them. You tune them. All you can see is the back of your heads. All right. Well, let me ask you, I'm just going to ask you some random questions, okay? And this again is not exhaustive, but at least gives you a good idea of what to expect. Remember, it's all multiple choice and true and false. Okay, just like the quizzes. No, I had some short answers in the quizzes, but not on the final. Women have constituted about what percentage of the missionary force? Do you remember that? This went way back from the beginning. About what percentage? Fraction. Well, the answer is 2/3. About 2/3 of the mission force through the centuries has been women. Very interesting. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you some names, and you tell me which one is not in a Catholic group. Okay. Here's one that's not a Catholic group, or which one is not. So we have the Jesuits, the Gnostics, the Franciscans, and the Dominicans. Which one is not a Catholic group?
Can you repeat them?
The Jesuits, the Gnostics, the Franciscans, and the Dominicans.
Is it the Jesuits?
Now remember, the Jesuits was actually the missionary force of the Catholic Church.
The Dominicans?
Yeah, no, the Dominicans were Catholic also. Think of the Dominican Republic, they're. Aren't you glad we're doing this review?
Mm-hmm.
The other two are Franciscans and the Gnostics. The Gnostics, remember, go way back, even in the times of New Testament. They're the ones that believed that material is good or bad, and the spiritual is good. Yeah. And the Jesuits, Laurel, they were the strongest Catholic missionary force. Okay. Who was the famous Jesuit that the Catholics still uphold today as one of the greatest missionaries of the Catholic Church? His name begins with a very unusual letter of the alphabet, his last name.
Is it Xavier?
Xavier, X-I-E, yep, X-A-V-I-E-R, Francis Xavier, right. Okay, who was the Bishop of Smyrna who was burned at the stake? If you get this one wrong, don't tell Dr. Paul. because Dr. Paul wrote a book about this guy. He said the standard on this guy in the world, published by Oxford. Who is this? Polycarp, right? Yeah, we're going all the way back to the beginning of the semester, right? Polycarp, right? He was the bishop of Smyrna. He was a disciple of the apostle John, right? John probably died in Ephesus, and Smyrna would be in that same region. So Sharon, we said here about 2/3 of the missionary force has been women. We also said that the Gnostics were not a Catholic group, but the Jesuits, the Franciscans, and the Dominicans were.
Wait, so it's not agnostic, it's Gnostic?
Right, an agnostic is somebody that says, I don't know if God exists. It means not knowing. Gnostics with a G, G-N, the G is silent, Gnostic.
The Gnostics were what?
They were not, I was asking which one of those groups is not a Catholic group. The Gnostics were not. They go all the way back to New Testament days.
That's the second one.
Yeah,
The Gnostics were not a Catholic group.
right. The Bishop of Smyrna was, remember who that was? Sharon? The Bishop of Smyrna who died, burned at the stake? That Dr. Paul wrote about?
That was way long ago.
Polycarp. All right, that's my review. Okay, so you remember Perpetua?
Perpetua,
Uh-huh.
not Perpetua?
Oh, you can pronounce it Perpetua as well. I don't know what the Perpetua, yeah. So where did she live? What continent? Africa, Asia, South America, or Europe? Where was she from? You remember the name of the city? That might help. She was the city of Carthage. Where is that at? Africa, Asia, South America, or Europe?
Europe?
Oh.
Africa.
It's in North Africa, right on the south shore of the Mediterranean Sea. Carthage, very important city in church history, in Western civilization, actually. So Perpetua, part of my problem, Laurel, is that I'm used to pronouncing it in Portuguese, Perpetua. So I don't know what the right pronunciation is. Let's see.
Where did you end up saying she's from? Is it North Africa?
Yep. A lot of it North African influence, even in the New Testament, right? Cyrene is North Africa. Actually, even Egypt is North Africa. All right. You remember the Chinese rights controversy? Did we talk about that? I think we did. The Chinese rights controversy happened in what country? Okay, that's the easy part. China, good, all right. And it had to do with not R-I-G-H-T, but R-I-T-E, rights. In other words, things, the way you do things, a right, a practice, okay? That controversy was between who? Was it between the Pope and the Chinese emperor? Was it between the Pope and the Jesuits? Was it between the Pope and the Protestants? Or was it between the Chinese emperor and Chinese Christians?
You asked the question again?
Nope, I'm just going to give you an easy way to remember this. The Chinese rights controversy had nothing to do with the Pope. He was not part of this controversy. It was an internal, remember the Pope's in Europe, okay? This was not something that had to do with Europe. This was a conflict between the Chinese emperor and Chinese Christians, okay? In other words, the Chinese emperor wanted to insist that the believers observe certain Chinese rites, and they did not want to do that. So that was, they were winning people to Christ, and those people were not observing Chinese rites and rituals. So that's a controversy between the emperor and Chinese Christians. Don't worry, it'll get a little easier when we pull our way out of the dust of the past here, okay? Who was known as the apostle of the Indians?
Brainerd? No.
Pardon?
Brainerd? No.
No, you're in the right.
Is it Carey?
No, it's before Brainerd. Now, and when we say Indians here, we're talking about the Native Americans. but back then they were still using the word Indians.
Is it John Elliott?
Yes, John Elliott with one L, right? He was known as the apostle to the Indians, right? Yes. I like John Elliott. He really had some good ideas. All right. There were some other guys that worked with Native Americans like David Brainerd and Marcus Whitman, remember, out in Oregon? And Henry Spalding, he was out in the Northwest Territories as well. But it's John Elliott. Who was the Moravian missionary to the Native Americans? Actually, well, just answer this. Who was a native, who is the famous Moravian? When we study the Moravians, who comes to mind?
Is it their founder?
Yeah, who is he?
Zinzendorf.
Right, Zinzendorf. Right. Right. Okay. By the way, he never did go to the mission field himself because he had a hard time with adjusting to different culture, but he helped other people get there. Okay.
How do you spell his name again?
Zinzendorf. Zinzendorf.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Let's see. How about? All right. What was, in the Oregon Territory, that's where Marcus Whitman and Henry Spalding went. What was the most pressing problem there? There are lots of problems, but what was the biggest problem that the missionaries to the Northwest Territory encountered?
Didn't they go, the missionaries couple, they went somewhere and they were selling things? Were they more focused on the business venture maybe, or is that not what you're getting at?
Yes, that did happen. And so how would you, what word would you use to describe that in general? One word. It really was materialism. Okay. They had but there was actually, let me just double check something in here. I want to make sure that I've got something clear here. 1 second. Boy. Just a moment here. Gotta check something out here. Okay. Yeah, okay. Material was a problem, but there was another problem that was, I just want to double check, make sure I had that right. The biggest problem that they indicated was lack of leadership. There were a lot of guys that, like Whitman was a doctor and Spalding was, but really it was lack of leadership that everybody was kind of doing their own thing and there wasn't unity among the missionaries, okay? So
That was the biggest problem, was the
the
lack of
biggest problem was
leadership.
lack of leadership, yes. Yeah, the materialism was a problem too, especially as the Indians saw it, but lack of leadership. All right. So who sent more missionaries in 2 decades than all the Protestants had in 2 centuries? Think about think about what group just really sent lots and lots of missionaries.
So,
Well, the Catholics did, but actually there's a group that even outdid the Catholics. Yeah, the Moravians. Think about it, makes sense. They're the ones that believe that everybody was a missionary, right? You take up your trade and you go. They ended up actually outnumbering the Catholics in the number of missionaries that were sent in just 2 decades, the Moravians. It's one of the reasons why we really admire their example. Who was it that kind of really popularized the idea of mission societies? Who kind of got that started? Not necessarily he was the first one, but he really popularized the idea of mission societies.
Was this Zinzendorf?
No. It would have been after Zinzendorf. In India. Who was in India?
Carey?
Yeah, William Carey, remember the London Missionary Society? Then there was the Baptist Missionary Society. So when you think of missionary societies, think of William Carey, okay? Now, when did he live? What do we normally, give me a round figure for when we usually consider the beginning of the modern missions era that started with Carey? What year would you attach to Carey? Nice round figure for you, 1800. Okay, so 1800 would be he actually started before, at the end of the 1700s. Okay, so he's the one that really would be most associated with beginning of mission societies. All right. Who had to wait 7 years before seeing his very first convert?
Judson.
No. I'll make it easy for you. Same guy.
Carey.
Carey. Yep. William Carey. So he's known for starting mission societies, but he also had to wait a long time before he saw his first convert.
Did you say 15 years?
7.
7 years, of course.
All right. Who did not become scripturally baptized until he arrived in India?
Matt Judson.
Yeah. Remember, he converted on the boat, right? He and his wife both, Anne. They converted and end up leaving the mission agency of the Congregational Church. Who was it that lost his first wife and actually went out in the forest and dug a hole, make a grave for himself? That was Judson also. Yep, exactly. Imagine that. He was really discouraged. There are lots of contributions to African missions, but which one stands above? Which one's considered to be one of the most notable missions contributions in African missions? All the different kinds of ministries that you can do, which one kind of stands above the others?
Is it Bible translation?
You're right, Bible translation. Think of all of the many tribes and all, Bible translation really, now medical missions is important, Bible schools, missionary aviation, but Bible translation really put the language in the Bible in the language of the people. All right. So I'm going to give you the names of some countries. Only 1 out of 4 missionaries survived their first term of service. Where? India, China, Congo, or Burma?
Is it Burma?
No. Congo. Missionaries were dying left and right, and primarily because of malaria. Okay. When you think of those early African missions, a lot of malaria took a lot of people, right?
So their first what term or?
Yeah, only one out of 4 missionaries survived their first term of service in the Congo. Now, people were dying in the other places too, but not like that. Which country had to close for a time because of the problem of opium imports? The whole issue of opium was where? China, right, good. Yep. It's a big deal. Let's see. Okay, Robert Morrison, okay, he joined the East India Company under pressure to work in what capacity? Was he a translator? Was he an engineer? Was he an ambassador or a professor?
Can you say them again?
Yeah, was he a translator, an engineer, an ambassador, or a professor?
Ambassador?
No, but related to that, I mean, he was a translator. They needed translators, and he was really good.
What company was it again?
The East India Company.
Did we have a section that talked about him specifically?
Robert Morrison? Did we not?
I don't think so.
You don't remember talking about Robert Morrison?
I think he's, there's a slide with Bible translation in there and names for the.
Let me go back and do a search here.
Yeah, he is mentioned in our Bible translation.
He's mentioned on the one slide, but there's not a whole section that talks about him.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, yeah, I see it here. I got the slide up here, Bible translation. Okay. So just all you need to remember from Morrison was that he worked for the East India Company as a Bible, as a translator, but because he was good with language. All right.
East India Company.
Yeah, actually, if we didn't mention that specifically, okay, then I won't ask you that. I'll not include that. All right.
We just need to know the translator.
Yeah, he was involved in Bible translation. I guess we didn't mention him with the East India Company, but yeah, you can make a note that he was involved in Bible translation. Okay. In other words, when you think of Robert Morrison, you think of translation. He actually was involved in both. Okay. Bible translation, but also worked as a translator. But anyway, I'll ask you that one. Okay. Who decided to dress like the Chinese? That should be an easy one. Look like a Chinaman.
Hudson Taylor.
Hudson Taylor, right. Right.
There were several that did that though.
Okay, yeah, who else had already done that before?
Or there were people after, I don't know.
Yeah, one group that did that, it'd probably be good to remember too, is the Jesuits. Remember the Catholic missionary force, the Jesuits? They also had that custom of dressing like the people they were serving, not just in China, but wherever they were. All right. So yeah, it's not like Hudson Taylor is the first one to do that sort of thing. Good. Okay. Do you remember who was known? This might be a little more challenging. Which couple was known for their open air evangelism? They would open their home and invite people in, and they would have serve tea, and they had an open house evangelistic practice rather than just meeting in a public place somewhere. They opened their home. Remember who that was? That might be a little more difficult to remember. Jonathan Goforth and Rosalind Goforth, right? They would invite the Chinese in and serve tea. She'd go back with the women in the courtyard. He'd have Bible study with the men. So the Goforths were known for their open house evangelism.
How do you spell her last name?
Just like Go Forth, but it's all one word. Yep, Goforth. Good missionary name. Okay. What was the greatest obstacle with missions in Oceania on the islands? Okay, what was the biggest problem there?
Was it cannibalism?
Well, no, cannibalism was often, that did happen in some cases.
Oh, the missionaries, their morals maybe?
Yeah, and it was their morals, but it was, yeah, it includes the whole idea of materialism, but yeah, moral laxity was a problem there. You can kind of put it together with materialism. It was easy. It was a nice life. You didn't have the same conditions you had in Africa and some other places. You know, very nice climate and all this. So it was very easy for materialism. Materialism, including the problem of sexual laxity.
Where was this?
In the Oceania, the idea of the Pacifics, there are those islands, Micronesia, Melanesia. Okay,
How would you summarize the biggest issue then?
it's really a combination of that. If materialism, it's interesting that where materialism flourishes, moral laxity often does as well. So really, it's kind of hard to say it's one or the other. People had nice life, nice conditions there, and it also gave way to more relaxed moral condition. Let's see. Samuel Zwemer, where did he serve? Among what group? Not a specific country, but what kind of missions? What religious group did he really work with, Samuel Zwemer?
Was that the Muslim?
Muslims, exactly. He really made a case for Muslim missions. And there weren't that many people looking that direction. All right.
Samuel, who?
Samuel Zwemer,
How do you spell his name?
Zwemer. Did we not?
It's too small.
It's mentioned one time on
Yeah.
the slide Muslim missions,
On what?
so we didn't really talk about it.
Okay, all right. You make a note of that. I won't include that.
What slide is it?
It's Muslim missions, where we talk about confrontational, traditional, institutional. He's mentioned there.
Okay, all right. We did, okay. All right, I'll make a note of that, not to bring that up. All right. Okay. What country is one of the few places where almost all Protestant pioneer missionaries were Americans? What place in the world? But they didn't have the competition of Buddhism, for example, that almost all the missions force were Americans. It's up in that same area.
In the Middle East?
Is Korea. Remember, Korea seemed much more open to the gospel than Japan. Japan was much more traditional and set. But American missionaries are much more welcome in Korea because they didn't have the dominance of Buddhism or Shinto or or Confucianism or something like that. Okay, so Korea, just when you think of that part of the world, Korea was the most open. Keep that in mind. In fact, and this goes right along with it. Remember John Nevius? He's the guy who had the Nevius plan. He focused on. Most of his life was in Japan. But he actually spent 2 weeks in Korea presenting his plan, and that's what he's most remembered for today, because Korea was more open. So his plan, it was some new ideas, and they bought into it. And Japan, where he spent most of his ministry life, wasn't interested. Who was the lady who struggled so much with singleness that she couldn't write about it until like 40 years after she dealt with it?
It wasn't Lottie Moon, was it?
Mm-mm. She did a lot of writing at the end of her life. Yes, Amy Carmichael. So think of Amy Carmichael. You can remember she did lots of books when she was an invalid, but it was also during that time that she was finally able to speak, to write about the struggles that she had with being single. Something most people probably don't Think about with Amy Carmichael. Who was it that learned the Chinese language by checking in mule drivers to an inn? Yep, Gladys Aylward. Remember? And she didn't get along with the other lady who worked there, but that lady kind of gave her that job, and it turned out to be the perfect way for her to learn the language. Who was one of the Cambridge Seven that went to Africa?
What was the last one?
Gladys Aylward. She learned the Chinese language by checking in mule people in an inn. Cambridge Seven, who was that?
CT Studd.
C.T. Studd, great cricket player. And he went to other places too, but he's known for his ministry in Africa.
What was his last name?
Studd, C.T. Studd,
Oh, okay.
S-T-U-D-D. Most of the innovations of the 20th century, were they innovations presented by Catholics, Moravians, mainline denominations, or faith missions?
What was it?
Yep, faith missions.
What was the question?
Most of the innovations and missions in the 20th century, they really came from faith missions. The other options were Catholics, Moravians, and mainline denominations. It was really the faith missions that got more of the innovations going than anybody else. What was a key factor in missionaries to Africa being able to survive physically? What was invented that helped missionaries in Africa to deal with disease? Remember the famous invention? It has to do with malaria. Yeah, what is it?
Can't remember what those things are called.
Quinine.
Oh.
Yeah, and we don't make a big deal of medicines and stuff like that, you know, but that's one that you should remember because the invention of quinine really did make a huge difference in the survival rate in Africa.
How do you spell that?
Quinine. Quinine. C.I. Schofield, he edited the study Bible, but he also founded what mission agency? He's really not known so much for founding this agency, but what was it? Do you remember? It was
Central America.
Central American Mission, exactly, right. Central American Mission. His name's C.I. Schofield, Central American Mission starts with a C. Maybe that'll help you.
Who started it?
C.I. Schofield. He's known more for his study Bible, the Schofield Reference Bible, but he started the Central American Mission as well. Boy. Ralph Winter. Okay. Who did he work alongside of before he left to found the U.S. Center for World Mission? It should be fresher on your memory. Who did he work with? Somebody invited him to come and work with him, another guy that we studied.
John
McGavran, exactly. Don McGavran went to Fuller and he invited Ralph Winter to come and work with him, which he did for 10 years, and then he left to start the U.S. Center for World Mission. Yep. All right. Let's see. You have just a few minutes. What was the name of the war that killed back in the days of John Eliot and the Native American missionaries? What was the name of that war that resulted in the deaths of many Christian, Native Americans?
King John's War.
Not King John's, King Philip. King Philip's War. Remember, they got tired of just too over the top. They felt threatened by the count of the colonialization.
Was that started?
King Philip's War. What?
Was that started by Indians?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because they felt like they were being backed into a corner. They felt like they were going to lose their own existence. So eventually they revolted, and many died. Mostly Native American believers, but But some Americans, European Americans did as well. King Philip's War. How long did David Brainerd serve before he died?
Is it
Only 5 years. Yep, only 5 years before he died of tuberculosis, right. Okay, who's the other guy that went out to the Northwest besides Marcus Spaulding? Just give it to you. Marcus Whitman and Henry Spaulding. Okay, yes, those are the two guys. Remember, they ended up going different directions. They both had asked Narcissus' hand in marriage. Remember that?
Wait.
Sure. What? Go ahead.
What are their names again?
Marcus Whitman
Marcus Whitman.
and Henry Spaulding. Yep.
you said they went out west.
Yep, to the Northwest Territory then. There weren't states then at that time, but it was the Northwest Territory. Do you remember the name of the guy that went to Greenland because everybody was told that the missionaries had moved out of Greenland, they got a new king, and this guy didn't hear that, and so he went anyway? And then he had to work with this guy and they didn't get along. Well, he was a Moravian. This other guy was I think he was a Lutheran.
Was it Christian David?
Yes, Christian David, right. And the other guy was Hans Egede, E-G-E-D-E, remember? But they ended up working out okay together. They're very different. But
What was the question again?
who was the name of the guy that went to work there thinking that all the missionaries had left? That was Christian David. He went to Greenland. Worked with Hans Egede there. Who was David Livingstone's father-in-law? What was his name?
Robert Moffat.
Moffat, yep. Robert Moffat, M-O-F-F-A-T. Pardon?
David Livingston.
Yep, he was David Livingstone's father-in-law. David Livingston married Robert Moffat's daughter.
I think missionaries are not allowed to have the same name anymore.
Why is that?
It's too hard.
Yeah.
David, and it's like.
I know it. Okay. Who was the redheaded missionary that went to the field in place of her brother? He died before going and she went in his place. Yeah, Mary Slessor, right. Yep. Now, would she have gone anyway if her brother hadn't died? I don't know. All right, hey, the time is up. I'm going to go through. There are several questions. I don't know exactly how many. I haven't quite finalized it, but we'll have it ready by tomorrow for you. I'm going to go back through and just double check everything here, and I'll probably weed out some things.
And it's open book.
Yep. Open notes, open book, open mind, but not open neighbor. Right. All right. Yeah, time is up. I hope that helps a little bit. At least gives you an idea.
It shows us how much we need to work on it.
Look, I've been teaching this for I don't know how many years. I'm still, having to go back and double check stuff. It's just, there's so much. And I've thinned down. What we studied here is there's a lot that we didn't get through that we did in years past. And I just felt that it was too heavy. And so you actually have a little bit less than previous years did. All righty.